Your brain, that weird wrinkly blob of jelly sitting in your skull right now. Did you ever stop to think about how absurd it is that you're using it to think about itself? Well, buckle up, Buttercup, because we're about to take a wild ride through the most complex object in the known universe, and it's the very thing you're using to understand these words. But here's the kicker. That magnificent thought machine of yours didn't just poof into existence. No. Your brain is the result of billions of years of evolution, a cosmic story that started with some seriously humble beginnings. Picture this. There you are, a single-celled organism floating around in Earth's primordial soup. Life is simple. You bump into food, you eat it. You bump into danger, you move away. No Netflix subscription needed. But then something absolutely bonkers happened. Some cells got together and said, hey, what if we, specialized? And thus began the great neural experiment. Simple nerve nets appeared in jellyfish-like creatures, allowing them to say ouch when poked. Well, not literally, but you get the idea. These primitive nervous systems were basically just a circle of neurons saying, if this happens, do that. The biological equivalent of, if you touch a hot stove, move your hand away before you become dinner. Therefore, as creatures got more complex, their brains had to level up to keep pace. Fish developed the first real brain-like structures, because swimming around in 3 dimensions is actually pretty tricky business. But they weren't content with just basic navigation. No Siri. They needed to process visual information, maintain balance, and figure out if that shadowy thing in the distance was lunch, or a larger fish that wanted to make them lunch. As some brave fish decided to flop onto land, talk about overachievers, their brains had to adapt to a whole new world of challenges. Suddenly, gravity became a much bigger deal, and they needed better visual processing to see through air instead of water. Therefore, the brain grew new regions to handle these tasks, like a biological Minecraft build, getting more and more elaborate. But here's where things get really interesting. Your brain still carries traces of this evolutionary history. At its base, you've got what scientists call the reptilian brain. Though some party pooper researchers now say that term isn't entirely accurate. This ancient part handles all your basic survival stuff. Breathing, heart rate, body temperature, the boring but essential things that keep you from becoming a very philosophical corpse. Sitting on top of that is your mammalian brain, which evolved as animals started getting more social and emotional. This is why you cry during sad movies or feel warm and fuzzy when you pet a dog. Your distant ancestors needed these emotional circuits to form bonds, care for their young, and not be total jerks to their tribe mates. But this emotional layer also means you sometimes eat an entire pint of ice cream when you're sad. So thanks a lot, evolution. And then, like a cherry on top of this neural sundae, you've got the neocortex, the wrinkly outer layer that makes your brain look like a squishy walnut. This is your thought powerhouse, the part that lets you ponder the meaning of life, invent calculus, or wonder why anyone thought putting pineapple on pizza was a good idea. In humans, this part got so big it had to fold up just to fit inside our skulls, which is why your brain has all those groovy ridges and valleys. Speaking of structure, your brain is truly a work of art. If art was made by a committee of sleep-deprived engineers who kept adding features nobody asked for, the whole thing is divided into hemispheres, like a walnut split in half, connected by a highway of neural fibers called the corpus callosum. It's basically the world's most complex information superhighway, carrying more data than all the internet cables combined. Each hemisphere has 4 main lobes, and they're all up to different shenanigans. The frontal lobe is like your brain's CEO, making executive decisions and trying, often failing, to keep you from doing stupid things. The parietal lobe is your sensory integration specialist, helping you not walk into walls or stick your hand in fire. The temporal lobe handles hearing and helps with memory, which is why certain songs can instantly transport you back to your awkward middle school days. And the occipital lobe processes vision, turning the light hitting your eyeballs into recognizable images instead of just a confusing mess of photons. But wait, there's more. Tucked away in various nooks and crannies are specialized regions like the hippocampus, your memory librarian, the amygdala, your fear and emotion DJ, and the cerebellum, your personal movement choreographer. These regions work together like the world's most complicated orchestra, except instead of producing music, they produce, well, you. All of this amazing architecture is built from cells called neurons, and if you could zoom in on one, you'd see something that looks like a tree having an identity crisis. Each neuron has branches called dendrites that receive information, a cell body that processes it, and a long tail called an axon that sends the processed info to other neurons. Some of these axons are so long they stretch from your brain all the way down to your toes. Imagine having to send a text message through a cable that long. But perhaps the most mind-bending part is how all these neurons are protected and supported. Your brain is floating in a bath of cerebrospinal fluid, like a biological waterbed, protected by 3 layers of membranes called the meninges, which sounds like a band name but isn't. The whole thing is nourished by an intricate network of blood vessels that would stretch for about 100,000 miles if laid end to end. That's long enough to wrap around Earth 4 times. And all of this is happening inside your skull right now as you're reading these words. Therefore, as we wrap up this tour of your brain's basic architecture and evolutionary history, you might be wondering how these billions of neurons actually talk to each other to create thoughts, memories, and that earworm song you can't get out of your head. But that's where we enter the realm of neural communication, a world of electrical impulses, chemical messengers, and cellular conversations that would make your social media feed look simple in comparison. So keep that thought machine of yours humming, because we're about to dive into how your neurons throw the wildest party in your body, sending billions of messages every second in an elaborate cellular dance that makes you, uniquely, you. Remember that time you tried to organize a surprise party and everyone kept spoiling the secret? Well, your brain cells are running the most elaborate surprise party in existence, sending trillions of invitations every second without ever spilling the beans. You're experiencing it right now, the greatest cellular shindig in the universe, and you didn't even RSVP. But here's the thing about your brain's party planning committee. It's absolutely bonkers how they communicate. Imagine trying to send a text message by throwing salt across a tiny gap and hoping it hits the right spots on your friend's phone. That's basically what your neurons are doing, except they're using chemicals called neurotransmitters instead of salt. And somehow this ridiculous system works. Let's zoom in on one of these cellular party planners. Your average neuron is sitting there, minding its own business, when suddenly, bam, it gets hit with a chemical message. This triggers an electrical cascade that would make Tesla jealous. Sodium and potassium ions start doing an atomic square dance, rushing in and out of the cell faster than teenagers raiding a refrigerator. Scientists call this an action potential, but really it's more like a microscopic Mexican wave propagating down your neural cellular highways. Therefore, this electrical surge races down the neuron's axon like a speed demon on a motorcycle. But just when you think you understand what's happening, things get even weirder. Because at the end of this electrical highway, your neurons pull a classic bait and switch, that electrical signal. Yeah, it turns back into chemicals. It's like your brain is playing the world's most complex game of telephone, except instead of garbling the message, it's somehow maintaining crystal clear reception. These chemical messengers, your neurotransmitters, are like the world's pickiest party guests. Some are excitatory, the life of the party, making other neurons more likely to fire. Others are inhibitory, the party poopers, telling neurons to calm down and take a chill pill. You've got dopamine, the feels-good messenger that makes you addicted to scrolling through cat videos. Serotonin, the everything's groovy chemical that helps regulate your mood. Norepinephrine, the wake up and pay attention alarm that makes you jump when someone sneaks up behind you. But wait, it gets even more bizarre. These neurotransmitters don't just float around aimlessly like lost tourists. They have specific receptors they need to bind to, like molecular nightclub bouncers checking IDs. And just like that one friend who always knows which club has the shortest line, each neurotransmitter knows exactly which receptors to target. The space where all this chemical partying happens is called a synapse, and it's so tiny it would make an ant's living room look spacious. Yet in this microscopic gap, your brain is conducting an orchestra of molecular musicians, each playing their part in perfect time. One wrong note, too much or too little of any neurotransmitter, and suddenly you're experiencing the neural equivalent of a heavy metal band crashing a classical concert. Therefore, to keep this cellular symphony from descending into chaos, your brain has developed an incredibly sophisticated recycling system. Special proteins act like molecular vacuum cleaners, sucking up used neurotransmitters and either breaking them down or recycling them for the next round of signaling. It's like having the world's most efficient cleaning crew at a never-ending party. But the real mind bender is how all these individual signals come together to form neural networks. Imagine each neuron is a person in a stadium doing the wave. One person stands up, which triggers the next person, and so on. Now imagine this happening with billions of people in 3 dimensions, with some people saying, stand up, and others saying, sit down, all happening faster than you can blink. That's your brain, right now while you're reading this. These networks aren't just random either. They form specific circuits, like the neural equivalent of social cliques. You've got your memory circuits, your emotion circuits, you're trying to remember where you left your key circuits. Some neurons are total social butterflies, connecting with thousands of others, while some are more selective, like that one friend who only hangs out with their small, trusted group. And here's where things get really wild. These networks are constantly changing. Every time you learn something new, synapses are strengthened or weakened, like friendship bracelets getting tighter or looser. New connections form, old ones fade away. Your brain is literally rewiring itself as you read these words, which means by the time you finish this sentence, you're not exactly the same person who started it. Spooky, right? The speed of these communications would make your fastest internet connection look like a snail racing through peanut butter. A single neuron can fire hundreds of times per second, and you've got roughly 86 billion of them. That's more simultaneous conversations than all the phone calls, text messages, and social media posts in human history combined, happening in your head every single second. But perhaps the most incredible part is how rarely this system messes up. Sure, sometimes you forget why you walked into a room or call your teacher mom. We've all been there. But considering the complexity of what's happening up there, it's amazing we can function at all. Your brain is processing the visual information from these words, converting them to meaningful concepts, storing them in memory, maintaining your breathing and heartbeat, keeping you balanced in your chair, and probably thinking about what you're going to have for dinner, all at the same time. Therefore, this intricate dance of electrical and chemical signals is what makes everything you are possible. Your thoughts, memories, emotions, and that weird dream you had about riding a unicorn through a marshmallow forest. But all of this fancy communication network would be pointless without something to actually control. And that's where we enter the realm of your brain's core functions, the basic operations that keep you alive and kicking. Because while it's impressive that your neurons can chat about Shakespeare and calculate rocket trajectories, they've got some more pressing matters to attend to, like making sure you don't forget to breathe or accidentally try to eat a fork. So keep those synapses firing, because we're about to dive into the control room of your personal biological spaceship, where your brain keeps all the really important buttons and levers that make you, well, not dead. You know how your smartphone has all those fancy features, camera, GPS, games, social media, but none of that matters if the basic phone part doesn't work? Well, your brain has the same deal going on. Sure, it's great that you can write poetry and solve differential equations, but first and foremost, your brain needs to handle the boring stuff, like making sure you don't accidentally forget to breathe while watching cat videos. Welcome to your brain's control room, where the most important buttons and levers operate with all the precision of a drunk octopus trying to play the piano, and somehow still nailing every note. This is where the magic of staying alive happens, whether you're paying attention or not. Spoiler alert, you're usually not. Let's start with the absolute basics. The autonomic nervous system, your body's autopilot. Right now, as you're reading this, your brain is juggling more tasks than a circus performer with ADHD. Your heart is beating, your lungs are breathing, your blood pressure is adjusting, and your digestion is, well, digesting. All without you having to submit a formal request or fill out paperwork. Therefore, your brainstem, that primitive little stalk at the base of your brain, is basically the world's most reliable employee, working 24/7 without ever asking for a raise or complaining about the lack of window views. But even this overachiever sometimes gets its wires crossed. Ever had the hiccups? That's your brainstem getting its signals mixed up like a GPS system recalculating in a tunnel. Speaking of mixed signals, let's talk about movement control. You probably think you're pretty smooth, right? Well, hate to break it to you, but every time you reach for your coffee cup, your brain is performing calculations that would make NASA engineers weep. Your cerebellum, that cauliflower-looking thing at the back of your brain, is coordinating multiple muscle groups, adjusting for gravity, predicting the cup's weight, and making split-second corrections. Also, you don't end up wearing your morning brew like a fashion statement. Therefore, your motor cortex has to work overtime, sending out more coordinated signals than a marching band director on espresso. But here's the real kicker. It's also receiving a constant stream of feedback, faster than your social media feed during a celebrity scandal. Touch sensors in your fingers, pressure sensors in your joints, balance signals from your inner ear. It's like having millions of tiny reporters all shouting updates simultaneously. And don't even get me started on your sensory processing. Right now, your brain is filtering through more information than all of Wikipedia, deciding what's important enough to push into your conscious awareness. That slight itch on your left elbow you're suddenly noticing. It was there before, but your brain was all, nah, they don't need to know about that right now. Sorry for making you aware of it. Also, your tongue is now uncomfortable in your mouth. You're welcome. Your brain has to process these sensory signals faster than a teenager denying they were on their phone at 3 a.m. Visual information zips from your eyes to your occipital lobe, getting processed by multiple specialized regions along the way. Some neurons are obsessed with vertical lines, others with motion, some with color. It's like having millions of tiny art critics all specializing in different aspects of the same painting. Therefore, your somatosensory cortex, the brain's body map, is constantly updating your personal space GPS, letting you know exactly where every part of you is located without having to do a full body pat down every 5 minutes. But this system isn't perfect. Ever tried patting your head while rubbing your belly? Yeah, that's your brain throwing up its hands and saying, look, I know what you want to do, but please don't make me multitask like this. Now let's dive into one of the weirdest core functions your brain manages: sleep. Every night, your brain essentially turns you off and forces you to hallucinate for hours. We call this normal and necessary, which really shows you how low our standards are for what counts as reasonable biological programming. Your circadian rhythms are running on a roughly 24-hour cycle, controlled by a tiny region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. Try saying that 5 times fast. That's basically your brain's version of a grumpy timekeeper. During sleep, your brain switches from its usual chaos to a different flavor of chaos. Neurons fire in synchronized patterns, like a flash mob where everyone actually knows the choreography. Your brain takes this time to clean house, literally washing itself with cerebrospinal fluid, like nature's dishwasher. Memory consolidation happens, unnecessary neural connections get pruned, and your consciousness goes offline for maintenance like a website at 3 a.m. Therefore, all these core functions work together in a delicate balance, like a juggler riding a unicycle on a tightrope while solving a Rubik's Cube. But the really mind-bending part is how your brain maintains this balance while also learning and adapting to new situations. Which brings us to the next level of neural wizardry. Because here's the thing about your brain's core functions. They're not just running on some fixed programming like a cheap calculator. They're constantly being updated, refined, and adjusted based on your experiences. Your movement control gets better with practice, usually. Your sensory processing adapts to different environments, mostly. Your sleep patterns adjust to new time zones, eventually, and with much complaining. Therefore, as impressive as these basic functions are, they're just the foundation for something even more extraordinary. But to understand how your brain builds on these basics, to create memories, learn new skills, and occasionally remember where you left your keys, we need to dive into the world of memory and learning. So keep your neurons firing and your synapses strong, because we're about to explore how your brain turns experiences into memories, skills into habits, and somehow manages to remember all the lyrics to that one song you heard once in 2007, but not what you had for breakfast yesterday. Welcome to the strange world of memory formation, where your brain decides what to keep and what to toss with all the consistency of a toddler picking out their favorite color. Picture yourself at 3 a.m., desperately trying to remember if you locked the front door, while simultaneously being able to recite every embarrassing thing you've done since 3rd grade. Welcome to the wild and wacky world of memory, where your brain stores information with all the organizational skills of a raccoon collecting shiny objects. Your memory system is like the world's most sophisticated library, run by a staff of anarchist librarians who make up their own categorization rules and occasionally throw books out the window. Right now, as you're reading this, your brain is deciding whether to file this information under important knowledge or things to forget immediately after reading. Spoiler alert, it's probably not consulting you about this decision. Therefore, to understand how this chaos actually works, we need to dive into the different types of memory your brain juggles. But first, let's talk about your working memory, the mental sticky note where you keep temporary information. It's like your brain's RAM holding about 7 things, plus or minus 2 at once. This is why trying to remember a phone number turns you into a mumbling lunatic, repeating digits like a broken robot until you can write them down. Your working memory is the stage where your conscious thoughts perform their little dance numbers. Right now, it's holding these words, their meaning, possibly what you had for lunch, and that nagging feeling you're forgetting something important. You are, by the way, but good luck figuring out what it is. This mental juggling act is happening in your prefrontal cortex, which is basically your brain's version of a really stressed out personal assistant. But then comes short-term memory, the brain's equivalent of a digital camera's buffer. It holds on to information for anywhere from a few seconds to a few minutes, like that person's name you just learned and immediately forgot. Your brain is constantly playing hot potato with these memories, deciding whether to transfer them to long-term storage or let them dissolve like cotton candy in the rain. Therefore, some of these memories get tagged for long-term storage, shipped off to various parts of your brain for safekeeping. But here's where things get really weird. Your brain doesn't file away memories like neat little video clips. Instead, it breaks them down into pieces, scattering them across different neural networks like a toddler spreading toys across a freshly cleaned room. Your hippocampus acts like a memory production manager, coordinating this whole bizarre process. It's stamping memories with context, emotion, and importance levels, like a hyperactive postal worker who's really passionate about proper package labeling. This is why smelling fresh-baked cookies can suddenly transport you back to your grandmother's kitchen, complete with the emotional warmth and that one weird painting of ducks she had hanging on the wall. The process of turning short-term memories into long-term ones is called consolidation, and it's about as straightforward as trying to herd cats while blindfolded. Your brain strengthens some neural connections, weakens others, and basically rewires itself every time you learn something new. This is happening right now as you read these words. Your neurons are literally growing new connections and pruning old ones, like an overzealous gardener who's had too much coffee. Therefore, sleep plays a crucial role in this memory sorting party. While you're off in dreamland, your brain is busy reorganizing information like a compulsive decorator rearranging furniture at midnight. But it's not just moving memories around, it's also strengthening important connections and weakening irrelevant ones. This is why sleeping on it can help you solve problems. Your brain is essentially running a defragmentation program while you drool on your pillow. Now let's talk about how you actually learn new skills, a process that transforms you from completely hopeless to somewhat less hopeless at various tasks. Your brain uses something called procedural memory for this, storing movement patterns and skills in a way that becomes automatic. Think about typing on a keyboard. You're not consciously thinking about where each letter is. Your fingers just know. That's procedural memory showing off its party trick. This type of learning involves something called neuroplasticity, which is just a fancy way of saying your brain is about as rigid as a gymnast made of silly putty. Every time you practice a skill, you're creating and strengthening neural pathways, like wearing a path through grass by walking the same route repeatedly. Eventually these pathways become so well established that you can perform the skill without conscious thought, which is great for things like driving, but less great for that habit of checking your phone every 3 minutes. Therefore, the more you practice something, the more efficient these neural pathways become. But here's the catch. Your brain is also really good at learning bad habits. That's why you can accidentally memorize song lyrics you hate or develop the ability to doom scroll through social media with superhuman speed. Your brain also employs something called pattern recognition, which is simultaneously amazing and hilariously flawed. It's constantly trying to spot patterns and make predictions, even when there aren't any patterns to find. This is why you might see faces in clouds, or think you're on a winning streak at the casino. Your brain is basically that one friend who's convinced everything is connected and has a conspiracy theory about why the coffee machine always breaks on Mondays. And let's not forget about emotional memory, stored primarily in your amygdala, the drama queen of brain regions. Emotional memories are like those friends who show up uninvited and refuse to leave. They're usually the strongest and most vivid memories you have, which is why you can perfectly recall every detail of your most embarrassing moment in high school, but can't remember what you ate for breakfast yesterday. Therefore, all these memory systems work together like a circus performing inside your skull, with different acts happening simultaneously and occasionally colliding in spectacular ways. But this incredible memory machinery isn't just storing information for the sake of it. It's building the foundation for something even more fascinating. Because here's the thing about memory and learning, they're not just about remembering facts or mastering skills. They're about creating the emotional landscape that makes you who you are. Every memory, every learned experience, every emotional response is shaping your personality, your decisions and your relationships in ways that would make a butterfly effect look simple in comparison. So as your neurons continue their relentless rewiring party, strengthening some connections and pruning others like a garden of ever-changing possibilities, we're about to venture into even stranger territory. Keep those synapses firing, because we're about to explore how your brain processes emotions and makes decisions, where logic meets feeling in a dance that would make any reality TV show drama look tame in comparison. Welcome to the world of emotional processing and decision-making, where your rational mind and emotional heart duke it out in the neural boxing ring of consciousness. Ever wonder why you can spend 3 hours deciding what to watch on Netflix, but can instantly choose to eat that questionable leftover pizza at 2 a.m.? Welcome to the absolutely bonkers world of your brain's emotional and decision-making systems, where logic and feelings duke it out like professional wrestlers in a soap opera. Think you're a rational being? Think again, you beautifully deluded creature. Your brain is basically running 2 different shows simultaneously: Logic Island and Emotion Ocean, and spoiler alert, Emotion Ocean is usually winning the ratings war. Right now, as you're reading this, your emotional brain is having feelings about having feelings, while your rational brain is trying to pretend it's still in charge. Therefore, let's dive into your emotional command center, starting with that drama queen of brain regions, the amygdala. Picture 2 tiny, almond-shaped structures that have all the feelings all the time. These little emotion factories are constantly scanning for danger, excitement, or that one song that randomly makes you cry in the grocery store. But here's the kicker. They're working faster than your conscious awareness, which is why you might find yourself jumping away from a coiled garden hose before your rational brain can say, That's not actually a snake, you Nimrod. Your emotional processing system is like a hyperactive kindergarten teacher with a megaphone. It's loud, demands immediate attention, and doesn't care if you're in the middle of something important. The amygdala teams up with other brain regions, like the insula, your internal feeling sensor, and the anterior cingulate cortex, your emotional conflict mediator, to create a symphony of feels that would make a teenage diary look emotionally restrained. But then there's your reward system, centered around the nucleus accumbens, the pleasure-seeking party animal of your brain. This is the part that makes you feel amazing when you eat chocolate, fall in love, or get a bunch of likes on your social media post. It works with dopamine, your brain's more please chemical, creating reward circuits that make lab rats with cocaine look like amateurs in the addiction game. Therefore, this reward system is crucial for motivation and learning. But it's also why you keep checking your phone every 3 minutes, like a hamster pushing a lever for treats. Your nucleus accumbens doesn't care about your productivity goals. It just wants its dopamine fix, and it wants it now. Speaking of wanting things now, let's talk about your prefrontal cortex, the brain's designated responsible adult. This is the region that's supposed to help you make rational decisions, control impulses, and plan for the future. It's sitting up there behind your forehead, trying its best to be the voice of reason, while the emotional regions are throwing a rave down below. Your prefrontal cortex is like that one friend who always tries to be the designated driver, calculating risks and attempting to make sensible choices. Therefore, when you're trying to decide whether to buy those expensive shoes, this region is crunching the numbers and reminding you about rent. But then your emotional brain bursts in like a sugar-rushed toddler screaming, "But they're so pretty," and suddenly your bank account is crying. The interaction between emotion and decision-making is where things get really wild. Remember that time you made a pros and cons list and then completely ignored it to do what felt right? That's because your emotional brain has a direct hotline to your decision-making circuits, and it's not afraid to use it. Your feelings are basically holding your logic hostage, sending it Stockholm Syndrome postcards from vacation. Social decision-making adds another layer of chaos to this neural carnival. Your brain has specialized regions dedicated to understanding others' emotions, predicting their behavior, and figuring out if they're judging your choice of breakfast cereal. The temporoparietal junction and superior temporal sulcus are like your brain's social media managers, constantly analyzing facial expressions, tone of voice, and body language for hidden meaning. Therefore, when you're having a conversation, these regions are working overtime to help you navigate the social maze. But they're also why you lay awake at night, reconstructing that one slightly awkward interaction from 2015, wondering if everyone secretly hates you because you said "you too" when the waiter said "enjoy your meal." Your brain's motivation systems are equally fascinating and ridiculous. The ventral tegmental area, try saying that 5 times fast, is like your internal motivation DJ, dropping dopamine beats to get you moving toward goals. It works with your anterior cingulate cortex to help you decide if something is worth the effort, which is why you can somehow find the energy to drive across town at midnight for tacos, but can't muster the willpower to fold your laundry. And let's not forget about your orbitofrontal cortex, the brain's value calculator. This region is constantly assigning worth to different options, like a price gun gone rogue in your consciousness. It's why you might value your ratty old concert t-shirt more than a new designer one. It's not about the objective worth, it's about the emotional value you've tagged it with. Therefore, all these systems work together to create your personal decision-making style, from the impulsive choices to the carefully calculated plans. But here's where it gets really interesting. Your emotional brain is also crucial for rational decision-making. People with damage to their emotional processing regions struggle to make even simple decisions, because without emotional context, everything becomes an endless loop of logical analysis. This means your emotions aren't just the annoying roommate of rational thought. They're more like its secret CEO. Every decision you make, from what to eat for lunch to whether to quit your job and become a professional dolphin trainer, is shaped by this complex dance between emotion and reason. Therefore, as you navigate through life, your brain is constantly weighing options, processing feelings, and making choices in a way that would make a quantum computer look like a pocket calculator. But all of this emotional and decision-making machinery is just part of an even grander system. Because here's the thing, your emotions and decisions aren't just isolated processes happening in a neural vacuum. They're building blocks of something even more extraordinary, your consciousness, creativity, and ability to ponder abstract concepts like why pigeons always look like they're plotting something. As we venture into the realm of higher cognitive functions, we'll see how your brain takes all these emotional and decision-making processes and transforms them into the abstract thoughts, creative ideas, and philosophical musings that make you uniquely human. So keep those neural circuits humming, because we're about to explore how your brain transcends basic emotion and decision-making to create language, solve complex problems, and occasionally wonder if your houseplants get lonely when you're not home. Welcome to the world of higher cognitive functions, where your brain takes everything we've discussed and uses it to contemplate the meaning of life, the universe, and why someone thought it was a good idea to make pant sizes different in every store. Congratulations! If you've made it this far, you've officially reached the penthouse suite of your neural skyscraper, where your brain does its fanciest party tricks. Welcome to the realm of higher cognitive functions, where your neurons put on their top hats and monocles to contemplate existential questions like, why do we park on driveways but drive on parkways? This is where your brain goes full galaxy brain mode, transcending basic survival needs to ponder abstract concepts, create art, and occasionally convince itself that it totally understands quantum physics after watching a YouTube video. Your prefrontal cortex is basically hosting a TED Talk 24/7, except the audience is you, and half the time you're not even paying attention. Therefore, let's start with perhaps the most mind-bending feature of your cognitive arsenal, language. Right now, as you're reading these words, your brain is performing the equivalent of decoding alien hieroglyphics at lightning speed. But here's the truly wild part. You're not just recognizing shapes and turning them into sounds. You're extracting meaning from arbitrary squiggles on a screen faster than you can say supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, which your brain can also process, by the way. Your language centers, Broca's and Wernicke's areas, are like the odd couple of your cerebral cortex. Broca's area is the meticulous speech producer, carefully orchestrating the symphony of muscle movements needed to turn your thoughts into sounds. Meanwhile, Wernicke's area is the interpretation wizard, making sense of incoming language with all the enthusiasm of a coffee-fueled literature professor. Together, they're constantly playing a neural game of telephone, passing messages back and forth through a highway of connections called the arcuate fasciculus, which sounds like a Harry Potter spell but isn't. But language is just the warm-up act in your brain's cognitive circus. Let's talk about problem solving, where your prefrontal cortex puts on its detective hat and channels its inner Sherlock Holmes. When faced with a challenge, your brain starts firing up multiple regions faster than a pinball machine on steroids. The dorsolateral prefrontal cortex acts like a mental whiteboard, holding and manipulating information while you work through solutions. Therefore, your brain can tackle complex problems by breaking them down into manageable chunks, testing possible solutions in its neural simulator and learning from past experiences. But sometimes this same magnificent problem-solving machine gets stumped by questions like, where did I put my phone, while you're literally talking on it? Then there's abstract thinking, your brain's ability to handle ideas that don't physically exist, like justice, love, or why anyone would voluntarily eat cilantro. This cognitive superpower lets you understand metaphors, grasp complex concepts, and appreciate that raining cats and dogs doesn't require an umbrella sturdy enough to deflect falling pets. Your brain achieves this feat through a distributed network of regions working together like a jazz band improvising on cosmic themes. The angular gyrus plays a crucial role here, helping you make connections between different concepts. and understand abstract relationships. It's basically your brain's metaphor generator, which is why you can understand phrases like time is money without trying to deposit minutes into your bank account. Therefore, this ability to think abstractly enables you to navigate complex social situations and understand subtle cultural nuances. But it's also why you can lie awake at night wondering if colors look the same to everyone else, or if your blue is someone else's green. Thanks, brain really needed that existential crisis at 3 a.m. And then there's creativity, your brain's ability to make unique connections and generate new ideas. The default mode network, a collection of brain regions that activate when you're not focused on the outside world, plays a huge role here. It's like your brain's daydreaming department, coming up with wild ideas while you're supposed to be paying attention in meetings. This creative network involves regions spread throughout your brain, playing together like an orchestra, where each section occasionally decides to perform a different piece, just to see what happens. The anterior cingulate cortex acts as the conductor, helping to evaluate which of your random ideas are actually worth pursuing, and which ones should probably stay in the 3 a.m. thoughts folder. Therefore, when you're being creative, your brain is basically hosting a neural party where different regions are encouraged to mingle and make unexpected connections. But this is also why your best ideas often come when you're not trying to be creative, like in the shower or right as you're falling asleep and promptly forgetting them. Speaking of consciousness, let's dive into the deepest mystery of them all. Your conscious awareness, that feeling of being you, is like your brain's greatest magic trick. It's the show your neurons put on for you 24/7, creating a seamless experience of reality from billions of scattered neural processes. It's so good at this that you don't even notice the blind spot in each eye. Your brain just fills in the gaps like a neurological Photoshop expert. The global workspace theory suggests that consciousness is like your brain's broadcasting system, where only the most important information gets aired on the main channel. Therefore, at any given moment, countless neural processes are competing for the spotlight of your awareness, like participants in a really complicated talent show. But most of this processing happens behind the scenes. You're only conscious of the winners that make it to the main stage. And then there's metacognition, thinking about thinking, which is like your brain's version of Inception. Right now, you're using your brain to think about how your brain thinks, which is the kind of recursive loop that would make a computer cry. Your anterior prefrontal cortex is particularly active during metacognition, like a mental mirror, allowing you to reflect on your own thoughts and consciousness. Therefore, all these higher cognitive functions work together to create the extraordinary experience of being you, thinking your thoughts, dreaming your dreams, and occasionally forgetting why you walked into a room. But this incredible system isn't just a static set of functions. It's constantly adapting, learning, and evolving. Because here's the thing about your higher cognitive functions. They're not just the cherry on top of your neural sundae. They're the features that make you quintessentially human, capable of writing poetry, solving equations, contemplating the cosmos, and still somehow managing to stub your toe on furniture you've had for years. So as your neurons continue their endless dance of firing and wiring, we're about to venture into the final frontier of our brain exploration, the world of brain health and disorders. Keep those synapses firing, because we're about to discover how this incredible organ maintains itself, what can go wrong, and how modern science is working to keep your neural circuits running smoothly well into the future. Welcome to the maintenance department of your personal universe, where we'll explore how to keep your brain's magnificent machinery humming along like a well-oiled cosmic engine. Remember when your computer crashed and you lost 3 hours of work because you forgot to save? Well, your brain doesn't come with a Control+Z function or a handy backup drive. Welcome to the maintenance department of your consciousness, where we'll explore how your brain's IT team keeps things running, what happens when the system crashes, and why turning it off and on again, also known as sleep, really does fix a lot of problems. Your brain is basically running the most complex operating system in the known universe, but instead of getting regular software updates, it has to maintain and repair itself while simultaneously keeping you alive, conscious, and remembering all the lyrics to Bohemian Rhapsody. It's like trying to repair an airplane while it's flying, except the airplane is made of thoughts and emotions, and the repair crew is also made of thoughts and emotions. Meta, right? Therefore, let's talk about how your brain maintains its health. Right now, as you're reading this, your brain is running its own sanitation department using something called the glymphatic system, a clean-up crew that works best when you're sleeping. But this isn't your average janitorial service. It's more like a microscopic SWAT team that clears out cellular debris, misfolded proteins, and whatever's left of that TikTok dance you tried to learn last week. Your brain's maintenance system is remarkably sophisticated, employing specialized cells called microglia. Think of them as your neural neighborhood watch program, constantly patrolling for trouble and cleaning up cellular trash. They're supported by astrocytes, the brain's maintenance engineers, who regulate blood flow, provide nutrients, and help maintain the delicate chemical balance that keeps your neurons happy and firing properly. But sometimes things go wrong, because running the most complex machine in existence isn't exactly a walk in the park. Neurological disorders can pop up like unwanted software bugs, ranging from mild glitches to full system crashes. Depression might occur when your emotion regulation circuits start running corrupted code. Anxiety is like having your threat detection system stuck in permanent virus scan mode. ADHD is similar to having too many browser tabs open at once, with each one playing a different video at full volume. Therefore, understanding these disorders has led to incredible advances in treatment. But here's where things get really interesting. Your brain's plasticity means it can often find workarounds and alternate pathways, like a biological GPS recalculating after hitting a roadblock. This neuroplasticity is why rehabilitation after injury is possible, and why you can teach an old brain new tricks. Take that, outdated proverbs. The future of brain health is looking wilder than a sci-fi convention cosplay contest. Scientists are developing brain-computer interfaces that might one day allow you to browse the internet with your thoughts, as if you weren't already distracted enough. Neural implants are becoming more sophisticated, like having a tiny IT department installed directly in your head. Gene therapy and targeted treatments are getting so precise, they're like having a molecular sniper taking out bad proteins. Speaking of the future, artificial intelligence is teaching us more about how our brains work, which is a bit like having a robot explain to you why you can't remember where you put your keys, but can perfectly recall that embarrassing thing you did in 4th grade. Machine learning models are helping us understand neural patterns, though they're still not quite as good at creating existential crises at 3 a.m. as your biological brain. Therefore, keeping your brain healthy is crucial for maintaining all those amazing functions we've explored. But it's not just about avoiding problems, it's about optimizing your neural networks for peak performance. Regular exercise isn't just for your muscles, it's like downloading more RAM for your brain. A good diet provides the building blocks your neurons need to keep firing away. Mental stimulation is like running a virus scan and defrag at the same time. Now let's bring this whole neural expedition together, because your brain is the ultimate example of the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. We started with evolution's greatest hits, watching how your brain developed from a simple neural network into the thinking machine you're using right now. We explored how neurons communicate through their elaborate chemical messaging system, passing notes to each other like teenagers in class, but with more neurotransmitters and fewer emoji. We dove into your brain's core functions, the basic operations that keep you alive and wondering why you're alive. We witnessed the incredible complexity of memory formation, where your brain decides what to keep and what to toss, with all the consistency of a cat choosing which side of the door it wants to be on. We explored the emotional roller coaster of decision-making, where logic and feelings duke it out like professional wrestlers in business suits. Then we ascended to the heights of higher cognitive functions, where your brain puts on its philosopher's hat and ponders questions like, Why don't we have a word for the day after tomorrow? And now we've explored how this whole magnificent system maintains itself, repairs itself, and occasionally needs a little help from modern medicine when things go sideways. Therefore, your brain is not just an organ, it's a universe of possibilities packed into roughly 3 pounds of thinking tissue. But here's the most mind-bending part. Everything you've learned about your brain in this journey was processed and stored by the very organ you were learning about. It's like having a book that reads itself and then writes its own review. As we wrap up this neural adventure, remember that your brain is continuously evolving, adapting, and surprising even the scientists who study it. It's the product of billions of years of evolution, countless ancestral struggles, and that time you decided to learn juggling, which your cerebellum is still slightly bitter about. It's the most complex known object in the universe, and it's sitting right there in your skull, probably wondering what's for dinner. So the next time you forget someone's name immediately after being introduced, or find yourself in a room with no memory of why you went there, or have a profound insight about the nature of reality while brushing your teeth, remember, that's just your brain doing its thing, running its neural circus with all the grace of a caffeinated squirrel on a tightrope. And somehow, through all this controlled chaos, it creates the magnificent experience of being you. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep giving your neurons new challenges to tackle. Because in the end, your brain is the ultimate frontier, a universe of possibilities contained within the confines of your cranium, waiting to be discovered, one synapse at a time. And who knows, maybe one day we'll fully understand how it all works. But until then, your brain will keep doing what it does best, being amazingly, bewilderingly, beautifully you.